Hi everybody, Gabriel from ProBuilder here. Welcome to another ProBuilder walkthrough video. Just a reminder, for these walkthrough videos, I'll take a more casual approach, starting with an idea or a topic and walking through the process organically. You'll see me plan, build, make some mistakes, solve problems, and adapt. This is big picture stuff, so check out the documentation if you prefer fast, detailed info. In this walkthrough, we'll be taking a look at how you can use ProBuilder to build a structure that has both interior and exterior. Especially with a bit of a bonus here, you'll be able to use this for something like an RPG style game where you need to see into different parts of the house depending on maybe where your character is or the direction that you're looking at it from. So this makes it a bit more complex, maybe quite a bit more complex in some ways, or at least more moving parts, but I think it's a good extra bonus to throw into this and really works into the interior and exterior part of the walkthrough. As you can see, if I start pulling pieces apart here, I've added quite a few sections to this, mostly to allow the player to see the structure from different floors of the building, to have different rendering modes, whether you want to show these little topper items or just the insides if you want them to see through the back faces or not. So this is probably a lot more than you actually need. We'll simplify it for the actual tutorial for sure. Alright, we have a brand new scene started here and we can start building up the structure. I think the best way to do this, probably just makes sense, is to start with the simple shapes first. We'll build those up, so foundation, levels, floors, or I mean walls and then floors, and then we'll add on the details, cut out holes for windows and doors, etc. So starting out, we'll create that foundation. I'll click on the new poly shape button in the toolbar and start building that shape. So I'm just building this out to what I think I'll want the overall border of the structure to be. I can always edit it later. Once I have that set, click back on the editing poly shape to exit, or hit escape on the keyboard. And I'm also going to give this a different color using the vertex coloring tools, just so I can pick it out from the other shapes more easily. Next, I'm going to create the first floor walls, so clicking again on new poly shape, and I can start clicking directly onto this surface, and the poly shape tool will automatically create on top of it. So there we have the walls, and you know what, I'm going to be building the interior of this, so instead of pulling it up to the full height of the walls, I'm going to start with this down at just 1 meter. Once I have that ready, hit escape and move into poly editing. I'll actually need to select both the top and bottom faces. So let's select the bottom and hide it. While we're at it, we can rename that properly. Let's call this foundation. And we'll call this level 1 walls. Good idea to start with naming early, or it becomes a big problem later on. So we hide the foundation. With the walls selected, I'm going to select both its top and bottom faces. And now I need to do an inset so I can create an interior space, make this hollow. So I'll hold shift while in scale mode and pull in on one axis. And then without holding shift, I don't want to do a double inset. Now I'm just going to pull in on the other. And I'm not getting this real perfect or exact, I just want to have them pulled in. Now I can move this around. Once I start moving, the points are going to snap, which is exactly what I want. And I'll also get the, or not also, but I'll start moving through, let's use an ISO mode so we can get this exact, and move these points around to exactly where I want them to be. In my case, I'm creating a pretty gigantic 1 meter thick wall. Again, we're just looking for the basic shapes anyway, so we can always thin the walls down later, not a big deal. And I'll select the top and bottom. Actually, let's just take the bottom, delete that. Then with the top selected, hold shift and pull down to extrude it, which creates those inside edges, backspace to delete, and there we have it. I can also, or I should also definitely, move into vertex mode, select all these verts and hit Alt V to weld, or I can click in the toolbar where it says weld to do that. And that's just going to make sure I don't have any vertices on their own. Now they're welded up here, they're not separate at all. Maybe to make that a bit more obvious, if I undo that weld, otherwise it's like this. So we pull them together, or we pulled them together in that previous step, but we need to make sure they're actually welded together, becoming a single vertex there. So let's redo that. Oops, got to move that back up so it's in the same point. And weld it. If you're seeing these strange, ugly lighting artifacts and such pop up, you can go ahead and just turn off. Make sure you turn off lighting. The light map generation, I mean, it's on by default, the auto generate in Unity. You can either turn that off, or I find the easier way is just to turn off mixed lighting and real-time lighting, and then you'll still get the basic benefits of auto generate. So now that I have this, I'm going to turn back on the foundation, and I'll take this wall, select just the top. I can grab one face and hit Alt-G to select all the faces along that same plane or angle. Again, you can check out Grow Selection for options on that. Don't want to get too much in detail here. And I'm going to pull that up to about 4 meters. I'll also drop in a stand-in or sort of a proxy shape for the stairway. So I'm just going to use a cube for now. Let's line this up here. And I know I want that stairway to have a nice ramp to it, so about twice as long as it is tall. So if it needs to be 4 meters tall, I need it to be 8 long. Something that can help here is turning on the dimensions overlays. You can go Tools, Dimensions Overlay, and Show. And now we can see here, it's 4 tall, 8 wide, 1 wide. So hooray, I've got it. I'll actually make this about 2 meters wide. 3 might even be better, but I'll stick with 2 for now. We can again always edit that later. And pull this around to a point that looks pretty good. Important to remember that when a person comes up this stairway, actually let's move this over so we can see it completely. When they come up the stairway, they're going to need a spot to walk around and exit. I at least have a tendency of sticking stairways in corners, and then when I go back into the game I realize people are walking up a stairway into a wall, so that can be a problem. Or even the opposite way, sticking a stairway too close down at the bottom. So anyway, there we go. Stairway blocked in. Just a quick proxy for that. Now let's bring in let's create the ceiling / floor here. I'm going to take the foundation. Let me go back a step. Gotta remember to name this stairway proxy. There we go. Or actually that's level 1 - stairway proxy. Keep that nicely named. I'll select this floor here, hit Control D, move it up. So that's where my new floor is going to be, and then I'm going to go back to editing the polyshape, and I'll use the polyshape points to quickly pull this in. Let's go back to a top view to make our lives easier here. Again, ProGrid's really helping out, making sure I don't have to worry too much about what I'm doing. As long as I'm on the grid, I know it's good. Oops, that is if I were thinking about this correctly. There we go, the gray space. Again, good thing I had set that different color for the foundation, so now I know the gray space is the foundation, the white is the wall, the lower wall. So there we go. While I'm at it, let's give another color to this wall. I also need to add a bit of a cut-in for that stairway here. So let's jump once again back into editing that polyshape. I'm going to click create. I don't really remember where that stairway was, but that's okay. We'll find it in a moment. Oh, there it is. And I'm just clicking and creating these points for the stairway. If you haven't used the new polyshape yet, you definitely should. It is super awesome. Okay, there we have a pretty nice floor set up. Again, just the basic shape. We're not worrying about it too much. At this point, just some visual tweaks. I'm going to turn off those dimension overlays. I don't really need them. And I'll swap my toolbar to the icon mode. I tend to prefer that. I actually find myself searching with my eyes, looking more when I'm using the text mode. And I can also shrink down this icon toolbar even more, so I get more screen space. Right about a 2 column is perfect, I think, if I can. Yep, there we go, perfect. Moving on, we'll create the second floor walls. So I'll grab the first floor, Control D, and move these up. Pretty straightforward. But we also need to add the peaks on the side. So for this, I need to select an edge where that peak is going to be, hit Alt-U to create a new loop there, and then pull this up. And I want to have a nice 45-degree angle on these walls. It'll help with the roof later on, we'll see. So I need it to be both 5 wide and 5 tall, it looks like. So right there. You can also see that the edge is going right through the corner of each of these squares in the texture. That can help. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Select an edge, hit Alt-U, or click the Insert Edge Loop in the toolbar, and pull that up 5. In fact, a good use here is in the inspector. You can just click under Quick Offset with that edge selected. We can tell it's the Y-axis right here. Just type in 5 for 5 meters, hit Apply, and it's done. If you're seeing the new faces here, or not new, but the ones we've moved a bit, looking a bit ugly, that's alright. We're going to go ahead and clean those up quick as well. So what's happening here is we've moved this edge in the center up, creating a bit of a twist in this quad, which just looks nasty, and of course it can't really be auto-UV'd properly. So we could delete this, try to rebuild it, do a bunch of fancy stuff, or we could just select these interior edges and move them up to match the angle that we've created by pulling that up. So with these interior edges selected, move them up a single meter, and now it matches. So that's one benefit of working on a nice, easy to use grid, right, all the way up at 1 meter. Adjustments like that are pretty simple to make. And as a bonus, this edge is going to match exactly our roof as it slants down and overhangs on the sides. Speaking of that roof, let's go ahead and build it now. You might have noticed that in this version, I have included the peaks in the wall with this wall here, versus in the demo version, I had included the peaks with the roof. So this was all one complete piece here, and then this wall was just flat on the top. So this is one option. I don't think it's the best though, because you end up with a much more complex roof construction, and your walls look a little strange with these supports sticking up out of them, in case you're, again, viewing it like an RPG style from the inside or from the outside like this. So let's go back to the building scene. And I'll go ahead and tell you a bit of trivia. I rebuilt this structure about 4 or 5 times before I figured I had gotten it right, and around the 5th time I figured out what I think is a pretty neat way of building roofs. Makes it very simple, and you can use it for a lot of different shapes as well. So let's take a look at that. First thing to do is check out the shape of your roof. So I have an L shape. It could be a plus sign, could be various other things. The point is get that shape, and then also figure out the width of your roof. So I can see mine is going to be 10 meters wide. And then I also want an overhang that's about maybe 1/4 of a meter on each side. So that's going to make this 10 plus 1/4 and 1/4, so 10.5. So I'll start by hitting Control-Shift-K, create a new shape, set this to, actually that's the Z-axis, the blue there, 10.5, and on the X, doesn't actually matter, I'll just set that to 10 to start with, and for the Y, I want my roof to be 0.25 meters high. And click on Build Cube. So there we have the start of it. Now let's turn this into the L shape. A couple ways you could do this, by either just pulling over the edge twice. That's one way, but you'll end up with these extra verts on the side, and also some things will end up a bit more complex because you need that diagonal in the middle. So a better way is to take the edge here, pull it over, and then extrude. But we actually want this also to be the exact width that we've decided, so this needs to move another 10.5. I could try to count that out one by one, or again, it's a great use for the quick offset here. I can tell it's on the X, the red axis there. Just type in 10.5 and hit Apply. Then I can select this face here, extrude it over any amount, doesn't matter yet. Hold V to snap those verts to the other verts on the same axis there. On the one selected, I mean. And we have our L shape. We have to make one minor adjustment before we pull the center up on this, and that is I want the overhang on the roof here to face downward instead of outward, so I need to select each edge and pull it out just 0.25 meters. Better set my grid to 0.25, not 1. pull that out, and the same on the outer edges here. So there we go. Got basically a little bevel on just the sides that will be overhanging. So the almost final step, we select an edge that can loop around through the center and hit Alt-U or click the Insert Edge Loop button in the toolbar. And I'm going to bring this up 5. Again, that's the height of the peak for my roof here. I could pull that up, but once again, I'm just going to use this over here, type 5 in for the Y value, and apply that. Then we have one final change to make. If you look here, the inner edge, actually I've gotten that incorrect as well. Let's see, oh, of course, because I had set this to 10.5. So I got my numbers wrong on the grid. The basic point is I want this line to be going over one, down one, over one, down one every single time. So if I look here, kind of an easy way to see it is looking at the anti-aliasing on this line. If it looks jaggedy, it means I don't have it correct. So I can select this and start pulling it up just till I reach the point where, there we go, that line is nice and straight. So now I know I have over one, up one, over one, up one, a perfect 45-degree angle. On the side, what I was trying to say the first time, it's still off. And that's because when we have one of these edges down here at the bottom, I'll drag select it. This is at a 45-degree angle going from 1 to 1. That actually equals the same thing as 2 up on the top. So 45-degree angle equals 2. All right, back into it. Grab those verts, pull them up, just 1. And now, after all that, we have this nice 45-degree angle on both the inner and outer surfaces. So a few complications there that maybe I didn't need to explain so much, but hopefully it'll help people if you run into that same issue. And generally, that's a pretty quick and simple way of making what is otherwise a fairly complex shape. Or at least it sure was for me over the 4 or 5 times that I did it previously. So now I can move this around, and I'm going to hold V and snap that point right on. Move this over, and again my grid is at 0.25, so when I move it, I know it moves 0.25, so I get the same overhang there as on the sides. And then it's simply a matter of selecting these verts and pulling them around to match. So I got that side correct. Actually, of course I did, otherwise something would be very wrong. I just need to move this out, also to match. And there we go, a nice, perfectly constructed roof without any of the usual mess that comes from creating and also trying to match it into the inner geometry at the same time, having all those extra verts. This is a real clean, nice mesh. With that done, it's time to start cutting holes in the structure, make it usable so you can play test it and all that good stuff. So first of all though, once again I'm going to run back through and quickly apply some slightly different colors here. Also we need to name that roof. Oops, I've already done it, right? With that done, let's go ahead and hide the roof and the second floor walls. Also the floor / ceiling, and start working on the first floor. So here I'm going to add just a simple door on one side. So I can select an edge where that door is going to be and hit Alt-U to insert a loop. Move it over, oops, make sure I've got my grid back up to 1 meter. I need to align those edges there and create another loop for the other side of the door here. And finally we'll create, well, we could do a loop all the way around if we really wanted to, but I don't think we really need to. We're not too worried about perfect quads right here, so I can just select these 2 edges alone and hit Alt-E, create the doorway here without adding too much extra geometry. With that created, I can simply erase the interior here. Oops, I need to turn on the drag select intersect option. Just a quick demo on that. So normally default is you drag select and it only selects the things that are completely inside the drag rect or that box there. So if you change that to the intersect mode, anything that even intersects with it is also selected. So pretty handy tool. Anyway, with that on, I can drag select, also select hidden is on, so it's grabbing the faces back here and the one down on the bottom there. And I'll hit backspace to delete those. and start going through. I just need a couple new edges here. Drag those over while holding shift. Oops, I should also grab this side here. And of course make sure to weld those verts up. There's our doorway. While we're down here, let's go ahead and create a proper stairway. So I know my stairway should be, what did we decide on, 4 by 8. So let's hit Control Shift K, choose a stair type, and we can align this blue preview object a bit better here. Delete the stand-in. So for the width, 2 is good. For the height or Y, that should be 4. And on the Z, or the length or depth of the stairway, that should be, I said 8, yes. Okay, that's great. Stair steps are enormous. I tend to try to keep it so I have 4 steps every meter, so I know it's 4 meters tall. 4 times 4 would be 16, so I'll type in 16 for the number of steps. My reasoning for that is this means that each step is still aligned to the grid, or aligned to the 1/4 grid anyway. So if I drop down to 0.25, I can edit these safely. So there's my stairway. Let's assign a color to that. Why not? It's automatically named stairs, that's great. I'll just go ahead and add a level 1 dash stairs. I'll turn back on the floor, or the mid floor, so I can make sure I have this aligned properly. I do not. And move that back. Oops. Make sure my grid is still up at 1 so things are snapping on a nice large grid size. Okay, perfect. Let's move up a level and take a look at the level 2 walls. Just a reminder, we're still working on just the larger shapes, so I'm not going to separate the inner and outer walls yet. First I want to make sure I have the details, cutouts, etc. On this wall here, I'm going to put in a window on each side. So I'll select the center edge on both sides actually, and I just need one extra vert in the middle so I can connect that over to these the sides over here where there's a vert on the side and create a nice edge going across the top. So with those selected, click on Subdivide Edges, and now I have an extra vert there which I can use to connect. Let's also make sure that is snapped onto the grid there. Same thing on the other side, I'll need to connect those. I guess I could select all 3 at once and hit Alt-E, no need to do that one at a time. And again, snap that up. So here I could do something similar to the door, add in some extra loops, etc. But I think I will use the inset method just for a bit of difference. Another way to do it, always good to see. So with those faces, both on the inside and outside selected, they're a little different, but that's okay. It will work fine. I'm going to hold shift and scale in, and then without holding shift, not holding it, scale in the other direction. Once again, going back to the same as the floors, I don't want to do a double inset. So I'm pulling this around, snapping it. Let's see what the other side is turned into. Pretty close, not bad. I'll hit backspace to delete that. You know what, actually, I keep forgetting a simpler way is just to delete one side. Then we select the other side, hold shift and pull it through. Looks like I didn't get these quite the same. Oh, of course not. I forgot that on the side I had pulled this down a meter, so these are quite different. That's alright, easy to fix. Grab this, pull it down. That's going to match this once I snap that to the grid properly. Quick note here, actually glad this broke. Right now I have my grid set to only snap on the axis that I have selected. To make this more obvious, let's take a look at this line here. So the problem I had here was I thought these points or this edge was on the grid. However, I had only moved it left and right. So you can see how it's snapping left and right, but it's not actually snapping to the grid. You can kind of tell by looking at, actually, let's just make it obvious, move into ISO mode. So you can see almost see, let's also turn on wireframe. Okay, so here are the grid lines in red. If I move this, it's not snapping up and down to those grid lines, it's only snapping left and right because I'm only moving it left and right. Once I use the y-axis, it's going to snap on the y-axis. So this is a setting you can turn on or off. I used to believe it was best to always have it snap on all axes, but began to find that it's generally better to have it just on a single axis. You can get more use out of it and you don't have strange issues where, for example, and sorry for the tangent here, but I think it's an important thing, an important item. Let's just move my grid amount up to 4 or something crazy. If I were to snap this point with just one axis or just on the selected, you can see how it snaps just like that. It's moving to the 4th or amount of 4 grid, a grid of 4, and it's snapping, which can look a little odd, but it's fine. It doesn't do anything too crazy. However, if I go into the ProGrid's preferences and change it to snap on all axes, now when I move this, it does perfect, good example. It does something that looks totally crazy, and that's because all the verts are snapping on all the axes at once, and they weren't to begin with, so they look like they go flying out. Technically, they're working perfectly fine, so there we have that. All those verts are now on an axis or a grid size of 4, but it's not at all what we want. So maybe the big question here would be, why would anybody want that? And I would say possibly for a situation like this where I'm being pretty careful about my grid size. I generally know where I am and I don't run into issues like those shown there, or at least I understand what's happening when it happens. However, if I move an item and I forget that I'm only snapping on certain axes, then I have a problem. So again, sorry for that quick tangent, or maybe a rather long tangent, but hopefully it helps some of you if you have an issue or you run into that yourself. Okay, so I built that window, Alt-V to weld it, moving on. Let's do the same thing on the other side, minus all of that chatter. Looks like I forgot to connect an edge there. Okay, so once again, grab these two faces, shift and inset it, pull that up, snap it. Oops, you know what? I have that snapping still left on all axes. Let's go ahead and turn that off before I forget that I have set it. So I was going to say, it doesn't matter now anymore, but actually let's Control Z to a point where these were not on the grid. So again, all these points aren't on the grid. You can click on Push to Grid in the ProGrid's toolbar, and it will snap all the selected points right onto the grid. So that can be quite useful. Okay, let's make these two match real quick on both sides. Looks good. Delete one side and I'll pull the other one over. And delete it. And weld the faces. Moving to the other side, let's add a bit of complexity. We'll create one large window in the center of this face. So we'll need to do something about this edge going down the center on both sides. Simplest way to deal with this, I think, is select both those faces and click the Merge Faces in the toolbar to merge them down to one. Do that on the other side as well. And before I go any further, this looks like I had something extra selected. Oh, look at that. Somehow I managed to select these faces as well. I must have done an accidental drag select. Control Z for sure there. Looks like it happened even before then when I had this one selected. Sure did. Okay, so let's redo that. We have this face selected. I guess that's a lesson to check your selection before you complete actions. There we go. That looks much more correct. And these two, and we merge those down. Perfect. Okay, much better. Alright, so now we have one face on each side, and we can do something similar where with each of them selected, I'm going to scale down and inward. Then I'll click on the Push to Grid to snap all those faces to the grid. And it looks like I got lucky. These each match. I'll delete from one side, extrude the other side over, holding Shift and moving it over. Delete that face, and weld up those verts. Last for these windows, I think I'll make them look a bit nicer. This window is currently 2 meters off the floor, which is taller than most people's heads, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'll pull that down to 1 meter high, and maybe pull these up just to let in a lot more light. That looks pretty interesting there. Looks good. And on the other side, I've managed to make these kind of ugly, blocky little squares. So let's fix that up. Also noticing I didn't properly snap this bottom here. And then I'll drop down a grid level to 0.5 meters. Select these two and move them up just a half. So they're a bit of a nicer looking rectangle there. While I'm at it, and this tutorial is already, or rather this walkthrough is already getting super long, let's take a quick look at what you could do if you wanted to move these up higher. So if you move this up, these faces, you're going to take this face here and turn it into a 0 area face. Notice if I move this, I'll do one at a time here. If I pull it up, it looks like we have a nice single edge along here, but there's actually this hidden face in the middle, and it's going to cause some issues once you start editing this further at some point. So if you did want to move that up, you're going to have to clean up a few items. There are quite a few ways you could do this. I happen to think the easiest is to just select these faces, delete them, pull this up. On the other side it doesn't matter because we have a bit more space to that edge up there. And now I can select any edge or vert on this this hole or border here and click the fill button. And it's fixed instantly. I could continue to move this up if I needed to. Pretty soon I'm going to hit the problem area up here as well, but we probably don't need to go that high, and if we did, we could use the same method of fixing over there. I'll just do the same action on the other side. Again, there are some other ways it could be done, but they would be much more complex, and there's not really a reason to use them when we have the fill tool now available. Okay, with the windows finished and the roof re-enabled, we now have our complete structure. So this is still just the basic structure, but it's really all we need. You could begin playtesting in this, use it however you like. If I turn off the roof, here's my second floor view. If I turn off the second floor walls and floor also, here's the first floor view. If this is all you needed from the walkthrough, go ahead and jump off now. Go start creating your own or watch some other tutorials, videos, etc. I'm going to move a little further on this and also detach the interior and exterior walls just to show a quick bit on how that's done, and I think we'll call it done at that point. This is already getting to be quite a long walkthrough, so let's go ahead and start with just the bottom walls here to keep it simpler. So to separate parts of a mesh, you can select the faces you'd like to separate out. So I'll grab the inside area here, and then just click on the detach button in the toolbar. If you hold Alt and click on it, you can get the options for that. You can choose if you'd like to detach it to a new game object, an entirely separate object, or to a submesh. Just for example, if I do a submesh, now I can move all these as a separate chunk, but they are still part of that same object. So let's undo that. We do not want that. And go back to doing this correctly. So again, Alt, choose game object this time instead, and now that's going to be the action that this button does. Click on detach, and now I have a separate object for these interior faces. With these separated, what I could do is, let's move back to object mode. If I turn off the outer walls, now when I'm looking around like this, as long as I don't have a double-sided material, I can see right through the back faces, so that your player, when they're watching their characters run around on the inside or whatever it might be, it'll look as if these walls are invisible pretty much exactly when they need them to be. It would be up to you, whichever method to use, of course. While I'm at it, I'm going to name this walls-inner. And I'll turn back on the outer walls. Oops, that's level 2 walls. Where'd they go? Right there. So whichever way works best. As part of this also, if I were to create, where'd I create that? There we go. A mesh for the door frame or something. Let's create this quickly. Something like this. And this is just a simple proto mesh, so I'm not going to worry about beveling the edges or anything fancy. Okay, so I have my door frame. Now maybe I hide this. You kind of have a bit of an issue where this looks nice from one angle, but from another angle you've got a floating doorway, so maybe you need some extra code or something to hide this when the camera's looking from a certain view. I'm not actually sure. That wouldn't be my area of expertise, but either way, should do just fine. Maybe this is good to keep here, so it reminds the character or the player that here is where they'd exit. I don't know really. So there you have it. I don't think we really need to go into any more depth on this. Same thing you would do for the top floors as the bottom floor here, detaching it. Maybe you'd also make those separate topper pieces, maybe make the floors separate. All sorts of choices you can make there, and of course adding all sorts of nice detail bits to your level as far as you need to go. Don't forget you can always take it maybe just this far and then export to Max Maya, Blender, etc. and start detailing it up. That'd be up to you. And then you can always keep these meshes as nice, simple, efficient collision geometry if that's all you need it for. Or if your game has a more stylized look or just happens to work with this style that ProBuilder is best at, which is not as high detail or organic, keep it this way and keep on detailing, add textures, UV map, all that fun stuff you can do right here in Unity. Most important, drop those characters in or whatever your players might be using and get in there and playtest. That's the big benefit of ProBuilder, is that you're in Unity, you can playtest anytime, your collisions, etc. are all working right there for you, as well as lighting as well. Speaking of lighting, we're going to skip that for this walkthrough. I think that'll be covered in others. Also, just general Unity tutorials, no need to get into that too much here. Thanks for watching through. I hope you enjoyed this, learned from it. I hope the tangents that I jumped off on and the various mistakes made actually helped everyone. And hopefully we'll see some examples. I'd love to see if people create something similar. Post it up, let me know, and ask questions if you're having troubles while you are creating your own. Definitely happy to help always. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the future walkthroughs.